We're going to run it right now.
Perfect. It kills 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that poll should be up. We are getting answers now. I'll share that shortly. So the question is, are you using Microsoft Operations Manager? We are getting answers continue to come in. And I'm now going to close that poll. I think we're ready to have a peek at the numbers. Oh, big adjustments there. Okay, so we're sharing that result now. 25% yes, 45% no, and 29% not yet, but planning on using it.
Cool. Well, if you're not, then I'm going to try to compel you to at least have a look.
Very good.
And my marketing spin, you can get an OMS workspace for free in about 5 minutes and start actually collecting real data and doing some playing around with it. So I'd always encourage to play with it, but hopefully I'll give a bit of an intro for those not familiar with the kind of functionality that provides, and encourage you that it's not a complete replace. So I think, are we 1 o'clock right now? Should I go ahead and go?
1 o'clock. You're on, buddy.
Cool. Let's go ahead and start. And you guys got my screen okay?
See your screen well, yes.
Okay, cool. I'm kind of shifted around for this. So, okay, so thanks everyone for having me. For those who don't know me, I've done a few MP universities here. Hopefully my gardener won't show up in the middle of this one, which was a little complication last time. But I'm actually with our documentation team at Microsoft. For years I worked with management packs and OpsMan, and if you've written management packs, chances are pretty good you've looked at my content or my training videos or my samples or anything like that. But the last couple years I've moved over into the OMS world, Azure Automation for a while, Log Analytics for a while, and now I'm working kind of on what we call OMS all up and looking at building solutions, leveraging the different services. And so you notice I have a question mark in the title there, which is Management Solutions. Are they the next generation management packs? And I want to, in addition to showing you what these things are and kind of giving you an idea of the experience around building them and why you might build one, et cetera, I want to kind of answer this question of, are these a replacement? How do these relate to management packs? So it's a basic theme that I tried to keep throughout this session. So first off, and this is kind of an update. The last MP University I did more of an intro to OMS, and I think I did maybe 5 or 10 minutes just on the solutions. And this is kind of assuming that you're a bit more familiar with what OMS is, what Log Analytics is, and give you more of an idea, kind of delve down in more detail of where we're going with solutions. And it is still pretty early on in this. We still consider ourselves in public preview for solutions. And so in any event, give me an idea of where we are and where we think we're going. But to just set the stage for this, and really 2 major points right at the outset that we want to make with this slide. If we think of the System Center world, and obviously we're talking OpsMan all day here, and I'm sure everybody on the line is probably intimately familiar now with Ops Manager. But we think of the different services that provides. And when it gets down to its core, we're doing a lot of data collection, events, perf data, that sort of thing. We're obviously doing alerting based on data that we collect. We're doing visualizations, creating views and dashboards and different ways of viewing data that we collect from our agents. In addition to that, we're doing automation, right? I mean, I've done tons of MP trainings out there, and a whole lot of those sessions are spent on writing scripts to do discoveries and collect data and do these kind of custom scenarios. And so OpsMan, in addition to all those other services, basically provides this engine for doing automation. We run VB scripts and PowerShell scripts. We run command line executables, etc. And so we think of this mainly one product providing lots of these different services. If we look across System Center, we have, Orchestrator comes into play a bit. For instance, it does automation, but typically for different scenarios. We certainly can make the 2 work together. I have a sample out there in the TechNet Gallery, an MP that allows you to call runbooks from a management pack. But for the most part, when we're talking about management packs and doing monitoring, we're focusing on Ops Manager and that one product in the suite. When we move into the OMS world, this really starts to change. And so when we think about what's the functional equivalent of OpsMan, would be log analytics, which we very simplistically can think of as OpsMan in the cloud. And definitely overlap, right? We do data collection. We collect the same events, same perf counter, same syslog, et cetera, that OpsMan does. We do alerting. It's a very different type of alerting, as I'll allude to in a moment. We do visualization, same types of lists and graphs, et cetera, that we do in the OpsMan world. But there's one thing that log analytics absolutely does not have, which is automation. There is no automation. There's no way in log analytics to run a script. There is no engine for doing that. For that, we have another member of the suite, which is Azure Automation, which is kind of the functional equivalent of Orchestrator, and is made to do many of the things that Orchestrator is made to do. But rather than really thinking of these large services or large products with lots of different features in them, when we move into OMS and into Azure in the cloud world, we're really starting to look at more refined sets of services that will compile together to basically to achieve a similar scenario. We also think of some other services that they provide, and something we'll refer to more as analysis in the log analytics world. Certainly we do analysis of our data in OpsMan, but log analytics provides this kind of ad hoc queries and being able to munge data in addition to those more refined looking visualizations and views that we do in OpsMan. Of course, when we start talking analysis, we can bring something like Power BI in, which actually does analysis and visualization. And so really the point of this, as I said, there are really 2 points when you think of moving forward, is in the OMS world, instead of thinking of these individual services like log analytics and Azure Automation as kind of these pillars on their own, we really have to think about the different services they provide and bringing those together to achieve a particular scenario, which is kind of different than the old System Center world where we have those individual products that we deal with more. The other point to keep in mind, and I'll really build on this on the next slide, is this is not an either-or. There are very distinct advantages to OpsMan and to OMS. And let's go ahead and move to the next slide, and I'll try to dispel the myth. A question that we tend to get fairly often is, I do this particular scenario today in Operations Manager. How do I do it in OMS? And very often the answer we'll come back with is you don't. Or you can, but it's not really going to be as good of an experience as OpsMan does, because there's not as much of an overlap as sometimes we think. I do a lot of talking with our consultants and people in the field, MVPs and our CAT team and this and that, and from what I hear from them, it's very rare for them to see an enterprise large customer that's doing OMS that's not doing OpsMan, because there's still a lot of different scenarios that OpsMan is very well tuned for that either don't exist, just maybe not today, perhaps will evolve OMS to get these other features, but we'll see what happens in the next 2, 3, 4 years as the cloud evolves, as applications evolve. Of what that looks like. But the reality today is that they both have some unique features, and it's the combination of the two that we're really seeing the most success with. Of course, my question back to them is, okay, well, if they can't get rid of OpsMan, if there's still these really key features and functionality that OpsMan has that OMS doesn't, why are they doing OMS at all? And of course, there's value add that OpsMan doesn't do that OMS can bring in. So like I said earlier, if you're not doing OMS today, if you haven't seen it, go out to Log Analytics. You'll be set up with a free account in 5 minutes, shove some data up there, and have a look if some of that value appeals to you. But to give kind of the list of how we view these things differently, if we think about the OpsMan world, you're doing hundreds, if not thousands, of these little, very, very targeted workflows. When you think of all these things management packs are doing, right? I see an event that matches this particular source, this particular event number. I want you to fire an alert, and only run that on this particular set of servers. And it's lots of different, basically beginning to end workflows. which is very different than the log analytics world, which is where we really separate collection of data from what we do with it. And we're not going to be overly targeted about that. Instead of saying I care about this particular event number, I'm going to say get the entire application, get all, say, error and warning events from the application event log, and just collect that stuff. Collect it from every agent I have out there. We have syslog out there, yep, collect that too. Go get these perf counters. And we just collect this, basically this big repository of all this data. And of course, we're in the cloud, so we don't worry too much about our scaling issues and that sort of thing. We separate that from our ability to do analysis and alerting once we have that collection of data. So it's a very distinctly different basic concept of there. When we think of the way that we analyze this data in the OpsMan world, we're very state-based. And so in other words, once an event hits that I care about, I better see that alert most likely in a few seconds, right? Or we have this entire model of our application. This component goes from a green state to a red state. We're going to see that thing went bad. We're going to fire an alert and respond to it. Okay, and so we're really talking about this moment in time type of monitoring and alerting. In the OMS world, and again, we're mainly talking about log analytics within OMS here, what we're doing is essentially collecting in all this data, not too much concerned about what we're going to do with it yet, and then say every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, we're going to go run a search, see if we see data that matches something, and let's go ahead and respond to that. That can be an eternity in the monitoring world when we're talking about a lot of scenarios, right? We're not doing this based on this moment of time. Where that does have an advantage, though, is I can do it much better data consolidation. So one of the scenarios that I used to hear a lot in the management pack world was, this basic idea, I want to analyze data across agents and respond to that consolidated set of data. We can do it. It's not the easiest thing to do. You basically go target a workflow at a management server and have it access the already collected data, but it's really not the way that management packs are designed to work. This is exactly what log analytics is meant to do. Take this enormous set of data with data from all my agents. I'll collect data in from Azure. I'll collect it in from other clouds, and let's do analysis against that. And so again, they're two very distinctly different with different scenarios with different advantages. And then, of course, OMS adds onto that with something that we call solutions, which is additional functionality. Now, you notice in this little table here, I don't list management packs on the left. It's not as if I'm saying we have management packs in OpsMan and solutions in OMS. Everything in the OpsMan column, I implement with a management pack, right? All those workflows, all the alerts, all the distributed apps and models and the whole bit, that's all, a management pack is the way that I can implement that. Now, a solution is certainly one way of implementing the logic in OMS. Everything I have on there, I can do and never even touch a solution, everything I just said. Solutions, I can distribute that functionality through solutions, or I can add a whole lot of functionality on top of that. And so start to get into a little bit more, if you're not familiar with what solutions are, and talk about the different types of solutions, and I'll do a little bit more straight up comparison to management packs. So if you first go into get signed up for log analytics, and you go into the solution gallery, you're going to see a picture that looks like that there, the different solutions that are available. You can add a solution to your workspace as easy as just click on it and say install, right? I want that thing, and it goes in. What you're looking at there are really two distinctly different types of solutions. And we're really trying to blur the lines here. But this whole, and I'll be honest, I hate these terms first party and third party because it almost makes it sound like us, them. And I'm trying to just think of better ways to describe this. But really until fairly recently, the only type of solution that we had was that was provided by Microsoft. And these could take data that we were bringing in, analyzing data we were already collecting. We could add additional functionality, additional visualization. So the definition of what is a solution is pretty loose. They can really do a whole lot of different things. I mean, you take something like the security and audit solution, and what that does is basically collect a whole lot of security logs and start really doing some rich analysis and visualization against it, looking for patterns that look like we might be compromised somewhere, comparing that with data out there in the world that we're analyzing from our security people. You know, adding in, hey, here's an IP address we saw accessed you, that's one that we consider very suspicious, doing that kind of rich analysis. You can go over to an extreme like service map, which is, if you're familiar with Blue Stripe, that does live discovery of the different applications and services that you have and connections, and Microsoft purchased Blue Stripe. That's been implemented as OMS solution. This is all the first-party solutions. Third-party solution is something that, again, we're fairly new in the last few months, and what we're trying to do is allow partners and customers to create their own solutions to add to our solution library. And these still pretty distinct in the capabilities of the two and what they look like, and these are the lines that we're really working hard to try to blur. It's obviously in our best interest to give more and more functionality to our partners, you know, to provide much richer solutions to build on top of our platforms. And so, again, fairly new to this, some initial solutions that are getting built, and obviously something we want to evolve. But when we're talking, these are the solutions we're going to talk about for the rest of the time here. These are implemented as ARM templates. And so, whoop, got some reminder of something I have there. But basically what we're looking at are all these services in Azure, such as Runbooks and log analysis and the whole bit, and all these services that I could create, we package them up into an ARM template. An ARM template, for those who aren't familiar, stands for Azure Resource Manager, which is basically a way of packaging up different Azure resources into one file and a way to deploy them. So common scenario, instead of going through the UI when I want to implement, say, provision a new virtual machine, I could create an ARM template that has all the definitions of that, and I could just call this template and say, here's a VM, I want to name it this, and it will go off and do that deployment for you. This is the mechanism that we're using to deploy solutions, and I'll certainly show that a bit more as we move forward here. So if we look at this straight up comparison of the two, management pack versus solution, these are really the different attributes that I would give to them. So first off, management pack world, it is the absolute only way that you're going to implement particular logic, right? No matter what you do in OpsMan, whether you're working in the auth console, you're working in MP Author, doing some advanced stuff, everything that you, when you're creating override, new rule, you name it, that's all somehow going into a management pack. A management solution, there's nothing really in a management solution that I couldn't create through some other means, that I don't create through other means. I can go and I can create log queries, I can create runbooks, all that without ever thinking of a solution. A solution is a way for me to package that up and basically treat it as a whole, and I'll talk about that obviously a bit more. Management packs are XML that I think you guys are doing fragments and all that now, and certainly that before all the interesting authoring tools came along, we did straight up XML is how we edited MPs. Management solutions are, again, ARM templates, which are written in JSON, which is similar to XML, only a little more efficient, I think. Management packs only include objects and OpsMan, right? And I could probably go through this list ad nauseum, right? Rules, monitors, discoveries, and all of the, basically the finite sets of things we allow you to do. Management solutions include literally anything that you can shove into an ARM template. Now, typically for solutions, we're using the OMS resources, right? All the things I've been mentioning, Runbook, searches, alerts, etc. But there's nothing stopping us from putting really any Azure resource into that template. And big difference is the management packs typically run on our agents, right? Obviously, we all know we drop a management pack in, it plays out to the agents, and it runs locally there. Management solutions run in the cloud. Now, there are ways of putting interesting, having processes run out on our agents that report back into log analytics. There are some, I'll give some of that along the way of what that looks like, but for the most part, we're running this stuff in the cloud. Okay, so let's start with this concept of data collection, because this is really one of the main things that we do in the MP world is collect in data. And so a lot of the MP, for instance, we define our events, as I said, events and perf data and all these sorts of things, and that's all kind of basic configuration stuff in the OMS world when you're working with log analytics. But when we get into this area of doing custom work. That's what we're fairly interested in. So if we think of how we get data into the repository, okay, and we collect data in from our agents, really just like we do in OpsMan. In fact, the agent out there is exactly the same agent that's used with Operations Manager. And it's a very similar types of data that we're collecting. Now, everything that we put into the repository goes into something we call a record. In the OpsMan world, we have events and we have perf data. And when I collect data, I basically have to get that data into one of those forms. In the OMS world, we're actually a lot more flexible about that. We can have really any record type we want. Just records, you have their unique set of properties. I have events have this set of properties, syslog has this set of properties, perf data has this set of properties. Perf data and events really are the same thing. They're just two records of a different record type, carry different properties. So this really makes things flexible for us as far as collecting different types of data and being able to analyze and collect data together. Another place we obviously get tons of data from is from Azure, right? And so mainly Azure Monitor, Azure Diagnostics. Azure Monitor is very, very quickly adding services into it and adding functionality. And we have lots of documentation out there on configuring that, collecting that data in. So again, once all that data hits my repository, I don't care if it came from a Windows agent, a Linux agent, if it came from an Azure virtual machine, Azure service, don't care. It's just all data sitting in my repository. Now, everything I'm showing there is basically, as I say, basic configuration, typically not things that we're including in the solution. Now, I'll admit this is a little simplified. You may be looking at that saying, wait a minute, I thought I could connect an OpsMan management group to log analytics. Absolutely you can. In that case, those agents I'm showing there, instead of connecting straight to OMS, are connecting to OpsMan, which is then connecting to OMS. So it's really functionally, once that connection's made, from a logical standpoint, they're really the same thing as far as we're concerned. So I'm thinking a little more logically here. But then what if we start to get into this now, I've got this custom solution I want to build, I've got this thing I need to manage out there, I need to go get its data. How do I get that data in there? And typically the way that we're going to do that is with a runbook. And runbooks, and well, I'm actually going to show these quite a bit in a moment. But Azure Automation, we have runbooks that are really just PowerShell scripts that run in the cloud, okay, which is really basically the same thing that we do in a management pack. We're just writing PowerShell, a monitoring script in a management pack. In the OMS world, I'm going to write a runbook in Azure Automation. Now notice I'm showing those running both within Azure and on the agent. Most of the time these things are going to run in Azure. There absolutely are ways, something we call hybrid runbook worker, which allows us to run an automation runbook on an agent. There are some challenges with it, and I'll get to that. Let me kind of go through the demos here, and I have a section on where we currently have some challenges that we're trying to figure out interesting solutions for. But again, very different than the way that we implement kind of that agent level monitoring in the OpsMan world. So let's delve down though into the collection runbook, and something I'll do some demo on in a moment here. Really three fundamental steps. And if you think of when we do monitoring runbooks or monitoring scripts in management packs, kind of similar, right? So step one is, first off, collect the data. As I said, we're running PowerShell here. What data am I collecting? Do they have commandlets that I can use? Do they have an API that I can connect to? It's always, whenever somebody asks, can I go monitor this thing over here, my first question is going to be, how can I get its data? If you have some way that PowerShell can access its data, then we're set, okay, whatever means that is. That's going to be step one. Step two, convert it to JSON. The way that our API works to get data into the repository is format it in JSON and then submit it, and we'll go ahead and create that data for you. So a lot of the script might be converting the data, whatever format it started in, some way to get into JSON. I'll show an example in a moment of some strategy that I use for a sample. Then the final one is to submit it to log analytics. That's something we call our data collector API. Now let's be clear, I'm showing this coming from a runbook right now, but this could come from anywhere, right? This is just any REST API client can write data into the OMS repository. I can have something running over in AWS, right, in Amazon Web Services that calls the API. It could have a client API. Any API or any REST API client can write data into there. Obviously, the way I'm showing it here is within the context of a runbook, which is typically how we're going to build our OMS solutions, but we're not confined to that. Now, of course, when I say that, you might think, well, anything can write to it doesn't sound all that secure. How's that going to work out? Okay, we're good.
Sorry about that, Brian. We had somebody join in, and I've got them muted.
No worries, no worries. Just I had a little bit of a slide build out of order there, no big. But every request that I send through the data collector API, I send in every log analytics repository, every workspace, which contains the repository, has an ID and a key. Right, so ID is the fairly kind of like the username, and the key is kind of like the password. As long as I have those two pieces of information with that request, that provides me my security to write that data. Okay, so that's what makes it secure. Now, the other point there where I show that record type CL, when I submit the data, I'm going to give it a record type. And basically, it's up to me. I can have any set. It's not like I have to go predefine this record type so I can write to it. I simply submit data with this particular type. We're going to go ahead, if we already have that record type, we'll use it. If not, we'll go ahead and create it. The reason that we append CL to everything, and you might have seen this if you use log analytics and use what we call custom logs, this is what we append to any record type from a third party. It's something they eventually want to get rid of because we want to blur those lines between what Microsoft is doing. And it really has to do with just having collisions on the names. You know, if you were to, say, create a record type called event and use that differently, it could be confusing to customers. And so we append that CL, at least for now. Again, it's something that, you know, we'd like to blur those lines and eventually get rid of. But with that, so let's go ahead and I want to show you a sample one. This is actually a sample I showed last time, kind of getting to be my standard sample here, which is just a bunch of stock quotes. So what I did is I was really trying to think, you know, what kind of sample solution can I create that I can run anywhere and play around with and try some different scenarios. And this is still, it's been working out for me for a couple of months. I'm still kind of running with it and trying to evolve it. But what this does is it connects to a Yahoo web service that gives stock quotes. I'm going to collect those as a record type and do some analysis and alerting in the whole bit as a sample solution. So this technically is the runbook that does it, stock collect quotes. That one is part of my solution, so it's locked, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I can play with this one a little bit better, which is the exact same runbook. It's just a straight up copy of it. It lets me do a little more with it. So if you're not familiar with Azure Automation, we have full edit, capabilities, test. This is just the PowerShell script. What I'm going to do, I'm going to jump right over and do a test run, which is going to take a minute. So while that's running, I can just step through the script real quick. So if we do a start here, we should go to queued, and that's just waiting for its spot to run. This just basically is a test environment where we don't dock you any execution time or all that. You can test and a little bit interactive testing of your runbook. But just to break this down fairly quickly, right here, I think right through there, this is just me collecting up it's just connecting to the web service. This fields here is just basically it's some code again, so I went and looked at the documentation for their web service, and this is how I define what data, what fields I want to come back. Build my URI here. I'll talk about this automation variable here where I'm getting the symbols, the stock symbols that I want to collect. And then here we're calling their API and getting back a response. Okay, so all this here, just calling the web service. Then throughout here, I use this strategy, and for the PowerShell experts in the crowd, you may look at this and think, wow, you could have done this way more efficient to convert this over to JSON. This is a strategy I used. If there's a better way to do it, great. Love if you told me that. But I first used a commandlet called convert from CSV, which just basically took their output, which is CSV, created objects, named objects out of it using this header, which are the different names different fields coming back from that. And then I used this little loop here to walk through each one and create a PS object for each of the stock quotes that I got back from their service. And you can pretty much tell here are the different, I have to do a little bit of calculation here and there to change percent. I just have to remove their percent symbol and turn it into a number. I want a date time here that I can submit. So it's just me, again, just working around with their data. I've done nothing specific to Runbooks here. I've done nothing specific to OMS. This is just straight up PowerShell. And then the last thing that I do is I take all of that and convert it to JSON. Because again, this is the format that I need it in order to submit to the API. Now I have this line here which sends to send that API along. Okay, now this is the one that I want to talk about a bit. First off, you see I'm sending this ID and shared key. In a moment I'll talk about where I'm getting those from, which is exactly that, giving me the security to write to that workspace. Here's the body I'm sending. This is the log type that I'm using. As I said before, we basically say what type we're doing. I called mine stock quote. I did nothing to set this up before. This will dynamically get created for me. And then I'm saying what I want the timestamp. So in other words, that date time that's associated with the record, I want to associate with this date time that I collected. Now this commandlet does not, this comes from a module that I loaded. If you go through our documentation, and I need to, that one needs a little bit of work, but our documentation for the data collector API, there actually is some work in setting up that authentication and setting all this stuff up. There are a couple of modules available. This is the one I'm using, OMS Ingestion API. This is available in the PowerShell gallery. This one was written by Jim Britt, who's a member of our CAT team. But basically, he's doing all this difficult work for us and creating up this whole API signature. As long as I give him the ID and the key, this thing creates it for me and then gives me this command to send what is it? Send OMS API ingestion file. That's where I'm getting that command from. So if you start doing this, you really want to go out. There are a couple other people who have written modules as well to do this in the PowerShell gallery. You can get those. So if I go back, I'll show in a moment where I have that loaded. Okay, but if we look, my test should have finished by now. Sure enough, there it is, and you can see this data coming back, right? There's what I got from the web service, which is just CSV of those stock quotes. Here's when I did that first conversion over to objects. And then this is the body that I sent. This is the same data converted into JSON. This is the data that Log Analytics wants to see. And then I finally do that post command there, which is what sends it up. Okay? So just to fill this in of where, if you're not too familiar with Azure Automation and how we do this, notice here I'm doing something called get automation variable. So what automation variables are, they're ways for us to store things in Azure Automation that can be shared amongst different runbooks. And this is just a strategy that I used to get this unique data in. So if I go over here to, let's see, just get myself situated. If I go over to Assets, and then Variables, here are the variables that I'm getting. Okay, and so you can see here the workspace ID. There's my workspace ID. My workspace key I have encrypted because that's obviously more secret. I want to keep that secure. Here's the symbols that I'm collecting. So if I wanted to collect some other symbols, I just change those here. Next time the Runbook fires, this is where it's going to collect them from. While we're here, I could have a look. That module I just mentioned, this is where that's loaded. All these other modules automatically just part of Azure Automation, but I have the ability to take any PowerShell module and load that up so that my runbooks have access to it. And that's what gives me that simple command. The other thing to look at here are the schedules. So this is how I'm firing this on a regular basis, right? So I have this running every hour. I think it's technically this one I'm connected to. I've been doing a little bit of playing around. But this says fire every hour. I can see the next time it's going to fire. And once I connect Runbook to that, that puts it on this regular schedule. Okay, so again, you can kind of, similar to the way that we do things in management packs, obviously the one thing missing here is target. There is no target. We don't have a whole service model like we have in management packs and OpsMan in order to target against, right? These things are just running in the cloud. Okay, so now that I have all that, we can see that thing running. One other thing to look at. So as I said, this runbook here is technically, it's exactly the same runbook, but this is the one that I actually have running on a schedule. It's part of my solution. I can actually look at jobs here, and we should see a record of how this thing's been running. I have verbose logging turned on here, which is a little excessive, but for testing, we can see here's the exact same data that we saw before in test, only this is the one that's actually running live, right? We can see the same. Here's the data coming back from the API. Here are the individual quotes, and then I think I returned the body, and there's the JSON that got submitted, right? So this stuff's all being tracked live production. So once I have that running, now I'm going to go over, I'm in the same workspace, but now I can do a log search. I can look at this stuff and see the data that we're collecting here. Okay, so I would just say type, and this is more of that kind of ad hoc analysis that I mentioned that we have in log analytics. I'm going to call it stock quote CL. And here we can see these are the records that I'm collecting, right? I can view as a table or whatever. Right? Again, nothing to set those up. This data type got dynamically created for me just when I submitted the data, right? And you can see all my stock quotes here. Now, okay, that's great. I have all this log search stuff, but what if we wanted to view it in a more interesting manner? So now I'm over here. Just make sure I'm not confusing by going through the different tabs. What I'm doing is looking at my log analytics workspace here in the Azure portal. Okay, and I can view all the same stuff. This is the Azure portal. The one thing it doesn't give me is the view designer where I can create my own views. I need to go to the OMS portal for that. So just to show, and we're working hard, everything's going to be moving into the Azure portal. There's just some functionality that's not quite there yet. But we can see the same view right here. This is my view that I created for this solution. I'm just going to view the same thing over here in the OMS portal. Okay. I need to think of a better home screen because the number of stock symbols I'm tracking probably isn't all that interesting, but so I'll probably think of some interesting graph to put there. Something wrong with my intraday one, but you can see here, I'm creating a graph showing kind of tracking of these different stock symbols. Give you an idea of how these are created. When I edit this, you can see here is a log search that I'm doing that runs this chart here. Here is the log search that runs this list. I have all sorts of different parts that I can create. So, similar to the type of dashboard functionality that we see in the OpsMan world. Okay. So I'm just going to leave that there. And of course, all this stuff ties back to my log search. I click on that. I'm looking at a query. I'm looking at all this data that's coming back. Right. And these are all services that are built for me. I didn't build anything here other than this query had to be a part of the solution. All this other UI here is just natural part of log analytics. In addition to that, I did an alert on this thing, right? So here are our alert rules. I have lots of just test ones in here, but the one that's part of my solution, I thought I had one as part of my solution. There it is. So I did a stock change alert. I said, okay, if one stock we see moves over 5% for the day, I want you to send me an email. Now, the reason this search here says 1 is just because I wanted it more sensitive, just testing. I wanted to make sure things were working, so I just dialed down the threshold. But what we're doing is we're running this thing every minute. If we see this condition, we're going to fire an alert. So this gives you an idea if you're not as familiar with the log analytics world from the OpsMan world. Instead of this, one workflow kind of beginning to end, which we'd fire immediately upon getting an event, for instance, instead, on the one hand, we're doing our data collection, getting all that into the repository. Then over here, I have alert rules, which are going to run on a regular basis and look for a particular condition. Okay. So taking all this stuff, right, that I just built around this stock quote scenario that I wanted to build, notice everything that I did really is just, we're part of log analytics, we're part of Azure automation. All this stuff, you'd sit here and build an UI, you'd write your script, you could collect your stuff. I have everything here. Right? This is not part of a management solution right now. Again, a very distinct, different concept than management packs. So then the question is, how would I package that up and why would I even bother to do that in the first place? So let's talk about this thing that we're calling a management solution. So what I just did, I showed this. We have a runbook that's writing to the OMS repository. I attached that thing to a schedule so it'd run on a regular basis. I have other, what we call our assets in Azure Automation. I have variables that have to get created to collect data. Other solutions might need other assets we call credential, their way of storing secure credentials or connections to other systems. Then I have log analytics. I have log searches I created so I can analyze that data. I have views that I created. I have alerts. So I created all this stuff. And that I could call a solution or a scenario, right? So then the question is, what do I get by packaging all that up into what we call a management solution? Okay? And how do we go about doing that? So what I mentioned before is when I package this stuff up, my first challenge is to create an ARM template which has all of these things in it, right? And again, I'm not really doing anything management solution-like yet, right? I'm just taking those resources just like I would do any Azure resources, and I drop them into an ARM template. And I could use that to distribute to other customers. And the analogy really, if you go back to OpsMan prior to 2007, we have MOM 2000 and MOM 2005. And management packs in those days were on what we called an AKM file. And an AKM file had all, rules and scripts and all the things that you're used to. But once you installed it, we had no idea where the stuff came from. We had all the contents, the scripts and the rules were running, but there was no way of packaging them together. I couldn't remove the management pack because there was nothing to remove. Basically, we just installed and all this stuff got created, which is really the way that ARM templates work. It's a way to deploy these things, but once they're there, there's nothing that tells me they belong together. I can't remove it. There's no kind of this packaging mechanism. To get that, we create an ARM template that has something called a solution resource. And basically, if you're familiar with ARM templates, they have a bunch of things called resources. A Runbook would be a resource. A variable would be a resource. The way that we distinguish an ARM template from a solution template is to add a solution resource. That gives us basically four things. Okay? First off is it gives us UI for installation. So when you install a solution, and I'll talk about the different ways of it's really just installing an ARM template. But if we install a solution, if we deploy it, say, through the Azure Marketplace, we're going to give you some UI. It's going to look at the parameters that your solution requires, and it's going to give your customers a way to provide values for it. So we're going to make that easier, look more like a package scenario. We're also going to have it show up in the Solutions node in Azure, and that's a little more. Actually, I can click on it. I can look at resources, and I'll show that in a bit of what that looks like. We're going to be able to remove it, so I can take that all that stuff that I just said. I can deploy it, I click on the solution, I say remove, all that stuff goes away. That's not possible to do without that solution resource. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to lock what we call our contained resources. And this just very quickly, I'm running a little bit short, so I'll do this fairly quick, but of course the management pack world has the three different types of relationships are hosting, containment, and reference. Very similar here, only we don't have hosting anymore, right? So contained resources do everything that I just said. We're going to deploy them. We're going to remove them. We're also going to lock them. So a customer, when my Runbook gets installed, they can't remove it. They can't change it. They can't modify my Runbook. Okay, it's what we call lock. And again, this is leveraging, and just locks are part of Azure. We can go and lock any resource. This really, we kind of make it easier on you. You just go into your solution, you say it's contained, and that gets locked. Other resources we'll just call reference. We're just going to deploy them. We're not going to remove them after it goes away, and we're not going to lock them. The reason that you might do that, take for instance that module that I showed. I want to include that module in my solution so it gets installed because my Runbook needs it. But let's say I have multiple different solutions that share that resource. I don't want them to go away when one gets removed. The other reason you might reference is you don't want things to be locked, right? For instance, maybe I want you to be able to disable a schedule. In Azure Automation, I won't lock the resource in that case. So again, these are some decisions you need to make when you're doing that design. So the experience of building, and I'm not going to go through and build an entire one because it would take way too long, but I at least want to give you a bit of the experience. Now, this is completely my world. Those are just screenshots of the documentation I have out for this. And we're trying to at least provide, I'd call it initial kind of rudimentary authoring experience. If I go back to when I first started creating MPs in 2007, it was straight up XML. I had nothing. I was sitting and writing XML and doing copying and pasting between my different solutions and that sort of thing. And now you look at where we've evolved. Now, obviously, you guys have been seeing, Select has come along, created these very cool tools that I wish I had back in 2007. But when we're building solutions, we're kind of back to square one. It's more of that manually building JSON. And what we're at least trying to do on the documentation side is provide you with templates to allow you to do some copying and pasting and really try to provide you guidance at least as a first step. So let's see, I think so let me, before I go into challenges, let me give an idea of what this experience looks like. Okay, so if I go to, this is completely my world. I'm going to get into documentation here, and this is basically process for designing and building a solution and what is a solution and all, basically written form of what I just said. And this is all the kind of the details of the solution file. So I'm going to take this. This is VS Studio. Here is my stocks one that I'll hold on to for a minute. But this is Visual Studio Code. I'm still kind of getting used to. I'm trying to use VS Code more. I used to use Visual Studio, but what's really interesting is the snap-ins into this. In fact, one of our member of our CAP team, if anybody's dealt with Christian Neese, who is doing a ton of solution work, he and I are collaborating quite a bit these days. He's actually working on, I guess, kind of similar to what you guys are doing with fragments. Providing some add-ins to VS Code where you can kind of snap in, hey, I want a Runbook, and then fill in, the template for you to do that. So we're trying to work a little more with VS Code. But for right now, if I was going to build this straight up, I could go over here, and what I'm trying to do more, and I actually found some bugs in prepping here for my demo, which is great because I already submitted the fixes to some of these. But here's the basic structure of a management solution. So I could copy that, paste that in. Now I know I'm missing the 1.0 here. That'll be updated later today. I'm not necessarily going to get here and go through that. We're getting into really detailed stuff that I think I'd bore everybody. But there basically is the start of my solution file. I'd say, well, every solution file has a standard set of parameters we need to accept. My particular solution might have others I need as well, but we should at least start with the standard set. So I'll copy that, paste that in. And I know this has a bug because I'm missing an in brace here. That's getting fixed later today too. So that gives me my parameter. If I needed to add other parameters because I needed to collect other information from a customer when they installed my solution, I just add to that list. And I'd say, okay, now that I have those, I want to add in some resources. I'll start with automation, and I'd like to add a Runbook. So here is a template for a Runbook. I'll go ahead and copy that, and I'll paste that in. Now what we've tried to do is put into here where we use variables as opposed to hard code, and we've pre-filled in variables that we typically are going to use. So you see my Runbook type is expecting a variable. My description is expecting a variable. So what I would do from here is I'd go up here, and we're thinking if these are things maybe we want to provide some kind of copy-paste for. Create Runbook. You know what? This thing still thinks that I'm plain text. That's why I'm not getting some additional stuff there. I get some color coding. Okay, and I'd say Runbook. It's going to have a name, which I would call, say, stock collection. It's going to have, don't worry, I'm not going to bore you here by going all through this stuff. Its type is PowerShell, right? And so we've documented for all these different types what the properties are, but this gives you an idea of the kind of experience you're going to go through to create these. Straight up JSON, not really, the rich tools. A hint to the silent guys. Be nice to have some tools to start building these things with. Here is the stocks one. Okay, this is everything I just showed you got deployed through this. This is its solution file. This here is the solution resource that I just mentioned. So all the stuff down here, these are all the runbooks, the variables, the schedules, the dashboards, the whole bit. Okay, this is the solution resource that basically contains all the others. So you see the contained resources here. These are all the other resources I want to lock. When they get deployed, when I remove the solution, they're going to go away. These are the referenced ones, which says they're going to go ahead and get installed, but we're not going to remove them when it goes. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all this. That actually is available on my GitHub if you want to go pull that down. I'm in the process of updating it. But to show what that looks like, as I mentioned solutions before, so we saw all the contents because that's exactly what I was showing. If I go down here to solutions, and this is just the Azure console, you can see here my stock solution. And I have, you can see, here's my dashboard, or my custom view that I created that it read through, and hey, there's some views that we can show here, right? This represents my OMS, or my OMS workspace that's related to this. I can look at logs that are associated with my solution. All these various, there still are some, there's still some interesting information I think we can put in here, but just by dropping that solution resource into my ARM template, I get this other rich functionality. I could then go in and delete this solution if I wanted to. All that stuff goes away. So again, those are services you can't do with just an ARM template alone. That's what really distinguishes creating a solution from an ARM template deploying resources. Okay, so let's bring this home. I think I'm right on time with what I wanted, and leave a couple time for questions. Challenges that we currently have, and let's be straight up with that, and some of this we're doing our best to document around. The engineering team is figuring out ways to handle this. Again, this stuff is all very new. So first challenge we have is when I just mentioned locks, that sounds really cool and interesting, but it can also be a challenge, right? One of the big challenges we have is I can't upgrade a solution right now. If I try to reinstall this solution, it would get an error because all of those resources are locked and can't be removed. So one strategy is we have a PowerShell script that will remove all the locks, so then I can go and update the solution, or you have to remove the solution and re-add it. All the data will still be there and sync up. That's not an issue, but that's kind of a clunky, experience. And that, again, that's something that the team is very familiar with and really trying to figure out strategies to provide that scenario. Another one is data sources. Now remember, I sat there and showed this custom script. We all know tons of the data we work with come from standard sources. It comes from event log, perf counter, all that we configure in log analytics. Well, what if I require, I need the application event log. I can deploy that stuff through ARM template. Why would I not include that in the solution? Today, those are not what we call idempotent. And I finally learned, I think, to say that word. But what that means is I can basically implement something respecting what's already there. So in other words, if I say I need error events from the application log and I define that in my template, if your workspace has error and warning being collected, I'm going to obliterate what you've got, right? So that's not an experience that we want to do. So typically what we're saying right now is to just include in your documentation, prerequisite to the solution is configure these particular data sources. There is work going on, as I understand, that the data sources will be getting idempotent, so then we'll start recommending that we'll include that in the template. Schedules in Azure Automation are pretty tricky right now. They require a start time when you install them. You cannot calculate a start time in an ARM template because that defies the concept of idempotency. As I mentioned before, if we contain them, some simple thing that you might want to do is just enable, disable on a schedule. Customer wants to just turn off some monitoring temporarily. If it's locked, you can't do that. So typically what we've been doing, and I need to update my sample to do this, is creating schedules through Runbook. So basically we do have a strategy when you install a solution, we can kick off a Runbook as soon as that thing gets installed. And then we install we create our solutions that way, and they will not be contained. So basically they're still there when the solution gets removed. Again, team knows about that, working on strategies. We're trying to provide good guidance for it. The last one, I mentioned this early on, is runbooks on an agent. So when we think about this in the MP world, this is standard stuff, right? I go and target, say, SQL Server with a monitoring script. It goes and deploys out to the agents. It runs the script locally. I have no target here, right? Now, I do have ways of scheduling runbooks on what we call our hybrid runbook worker. I can go into Azure Automation. I say, start a runbook. I want to run it on that agent over there. But from a solution concept, we have no idea what that agent's going to be. A strategy we can do, we haven't documented this. I most likely will. I just want to make sure we understand all the implications of it. But what we do is have kind of a master runbook that would look at, here are these different agents that need to run this particular runbook, and then go ahead for each one, basically we have a commandlet that will start a runbook, and we can specify the agents that it's going to run on, so that way we can dynamically determine that at runtime. So again, not nearly as elegant as the OpsMan strategy, but as I mentioned before, really different types of scenarios that we're looking at doing this for. All right. So again, kind of this distinguishing between the advantages of the two different products. So the last thing to talk about, and I won't go through this in detail, I'll show a tiny little demo on it, but how do we publish these things? How do we distribute them? And there are really three basic ways to do it. First off, they're ARM templates. You can do it in ARM templates, just a file, right? It's just a JSON file. You could download it from somebody. I can hand you a copy of one, and you could install it from, that's the Azure CLI there, installing it. There, you could do it through PowerShell. There is a way to install a template through the portal. Typically, this is where you're kind of doing your internal work, your testing, and just keeping things at a file level. When I'm doing testing, I just have a PowerShell script that goes and runs. I do my editing, I run the thing, and that installs my update. Kind of the next level from that is what we call the Azure Quick Start templates. Now this Azure Quick Start template, these are ARM templates. These aren't just OMS solutions, but we absolutely can include OMS solutions in there. There are some samples in there. We really want to start getting some more in there to give some better examples. These are a way that anybody can submit to the community. This sits in front of GitHub, so if you're familiar with GitHub, great. If you're not, you probably want to get familiar with GitHub, because it seems like more and more we're just doing distribution and management of this kind of thing through there. But go to Azure Quick Start templates. We've got the guidance how you can submit to that and other solutions that you can get from others. And then we have the Azure Marketplace, which is what I showed, which certainly our first-party solutions are available through, but also we do have a process for customers to go through to get into the Azure Marketplace. And again, this is a little bigger than OMS. There are all sorts of resources throughout Azure that we can distribute through here. And this is something we need to give a little more documented guidance on. Right now, our engineering team has been working more a little specifically with individual partners to do this, to go through. There's obviously a lot stricter requirements in order to get into the marketplace. But this is ultimately the place where we want to be that consolidation. As I said before, we really want to blur those lines between the solutions that Microsoft is writing and the solutions that we're offering through third parties or through partners. I got to stop using that third party term. But just to show you what that looks like, and this is a tiny little demo I'll do here. If I add something into Azure, and then I can search the marketplace here. And my Azure's running really slow. I should see like some cool UI over here. Well, if you've ever seen the Azure Marketplace, it should be showing up. I'm not sure why it's not. Let's just say, let's see, like there's a containers. Well, for some reason, I should have seen some little more interesting UI kind of homepage there. For instance, this is the containers solution that we have available. You can see here, this is the custom view, and I could just do a create through here, and here's where I'm prompting for basically for parameters that this solution needs. When you say a partner creates a solution, customer creates a solution, deploys through here, whatever parameters you need the customer to provide when they do the install, this is what we would provide the UI for, right? It's just as part of putting it into the marketplace. So that pretty well covers it. I guess I left a little time for questions, huh?
You know what, Brian, that's perfect. Thank you very much. We do have some questions that have come in, and we've decided that we're going to leave these for the expert. That's you, Brian. And so,
since he's not here, I'll answer them.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see the question applet, if you want to undock that and step through them yourself.
Oh, yeah.
The first question.
Right now? Do you see what I'm doing?
I cannot see your question applet, but the first question is at 101 from Simon Dion, so you could probably just scroll down to the bottom. Happy to read them out to you, but whatever you like.
Okay. Is it OMS was an add-in to SCUM or a feature replacement of SCUM? Is that the first one?
That's the first one, and there's a few more after that.
Okay, so very quickly, OMS is entirely different than OpsMan. It is it's an Azure service, right? Or it's a set of Azure services more likely. Log Analytics, Azure Automation, Azure Backup, and Azure Site Recovery, as well as all the solutions that run in it. Definitely are connections we can make to SCOM. We plenty of guidance on all that. Connect up to your OpsMan environment. Use the two in a hybrid fashion the whole day. Future replacement, maybe theoretically. Who knows what will happen 5 years from now, right? Right now, it is, like I said before, I think they complement one another right now. OMS compared to Splunk capabilities of Splunk login. I'm going to apologize. I kind of moved out of the real world right when Splunk was taking off, and so I don't think I would do that question justice. It's something we hear a lot, and I probably should do a solid comparison between the two. So I apologize if I tried to answer that question. I think I would do a bad job of it. I do know tons of people are using it, and it's something that, I even hear our log analytics team, talking about. We want to make sure that we do a good job, the kind of services they're providing. So I will take that as a requirement for me to get that information out. Plans for SCOM into SaaS, maybe integrating to OMS. I'm assuming that means basically, why don't we just take SCOM and put it in the cloud? I put it this way, if I did know that we were going to do that, I probably wouldn't be allowed to say so. So I kind of agree. That would be really slick. Just put my management server up in the cloud, kind of like we did with PowerShell DSC and Azure Automation. So, but I don't know of anything along those lines, but I think it's a cool idea. Kind of support for other cloud providers, OMS for AWS, for example, SCOM. Yeah, so nothing specific. We do need to get, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, and I apologize if I'm wrong on this. I think we have a solution for Azure Web Services. If we don't, there's nothing stopping running in the cloud. So I can reach over into their cloud as long as I have authentication for it, and I can pull data. So if we don't today, I can't imagine you're not going to see something. So my apologies for not knowing the specific answer. Certainly more samples that we need to put out because we know, obviously tons of people are using AWS. We use AWS in a lot of testing that we do. So if not something today, you'll see it. Do you still need paid Azure subscription to use OMS with SCOM? I don't. Pricing questions, I so try to stay away from. I use free stuff with it. You run out of space pretty quick, but I even if I try.
So Brian, we've lost your audio momentarily. So if you're
lots of data consolidate from other sources, etc. So I don't know that specific answer, but that's absolutely the type of thing that those solutions are going to do. Lastly, the other two.
Sure, let's go for it if they're, yeah.
Can solutions be extended to other cloud environments? Okay, I think we already said that. Nothing restricted. Again, anything that I can get from the cloud, I should be able to create a solution for, right? I mean, that when I wrote the data collector, I showed you that Runbook, zero stopping me from just using the APIs into AWS. We will be putting out samples for that. No question. We have to. We've already done some playing with it. I have a Runbook, actually. It runs because I have VMs running in AWS. I have a Runbook that fires like at midnight every night and turns them off in case I forgot. So certainly possible. Modify the reports. Can I modify the reports in the MP?
Yeah, we got that one, Brian.
Okay, you got that. Cool. Thank you. I think I got them all.
Yeah, I think you got them all. That's excellent.
And I have to take a breath now.
And no gardeners at the door or anything. No, excellent.
But my last point, I believe I put my email up at the top there. If not, I'll throw it up there now. But like I said, I write all the documentation for this stuff that I talked about. So please, if you don't see it, if it's confusing, if you see something you think is wrong, there's my email. Please don't hesitate.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, on behalf of our audience, Brian, I'd like to thank you again for being a part of our MP University event, and all our presenters do a lot to contributing to the awesome attendance we get. We've had well over 450 people registered for today's event.
Randy, Anita.